Hey, it's Soul, and welcome back to Warcraft Weekly. Do hit that like button and subscribe and support the channel so that snazzy animation I just bought is worth it, and let's start with the easy stuff. In a beefy hotfix, the WoW team made your bad rolls on the Great Vault a little bit less bad by revamping the constellation tokens that you choose if the gear above, well, sucks. For one thing, you can now carry up to 12 of these tokens at once. You'll also get up to 6 tokens depending on how many nodes on the Great Vault you've unlocked. So if you unlock 1, you get 2 tokens, if you unlock 2, you get 4 tokens, and 3 will get you 6 of these tokens. Most importantly, there are new items that you can purchase, like a gold reward. Wow! How about though, renown, or moats, or ciphers, or enlightened reputations, but most importantly, a socket upgrade. So that's where you've been hiding, you coward, you. The feedback to this has mostly been positive, as before, the rewards bought with these tokens just weren't very great. Now a bad week might equate to like a socket upgrade that you can save for that best in slot piece that you want, and it didn't take a buttload of grinding for a reputation. It's a step in the right direction, but for some, it's not a big enough step, where some would rather see the Great Vault take on bad RNG, namely seeing repeat or duplicate items. Or better yet, how about adding a vendor so we can use tokens to buy exactly what we want? On the other side of this too are solo players who basically no longer have access to socket upgrades at all, because the Great Vault involves being around, well, maybe even touching other people. Even when we consider solo players who are willing to like jump into the raid finder difficulty, those players won't be able to earn the full 6 tokens until early April. It's worth asking, why bother with these types of players, right? Like, what's the point of they getting socket upgrades sooner, if at all? My response to that though is, well, why take away the opportunity when they had it before? I don't have a specific solution, but ciphers of the first ones are only used to buy so many things before spending them on what? Like a loot box that costs 700 ciphers. On the other side of things, Cosmic Flux will get a chance to flex pretty soon, with the second legendary coming next week, and later the Creation Catalyst. Maybe one or a combination of these currencies could be used for sockets. While on the subject of currencies, there's another round of BattleNet sales going on. Okay, this has nothing to do with currencies. Most Blizzard franchises are on sale, from Call of Duty to Diablo to the Arcade Collection for only $10. You know, back in my day, I remember renting these games, and I paid more over time. Yeah, that's right, Zoomers, games were like slices of bread, and we went to a store to pick them up and bring them back. Ugh. And on the Warcraft side of this, a big sale on the Cat Pack. Yeah, pass. We'll talk about the Race to World first in a little bit, but first I want to talk about one of its particular encounters, namely the Lords of Dread. Minor spoilers coming, so use the navigation thing to jump somewhere else if you want. Just this past weekend, social media had kind of a dust-up over this encounter where the 2 bosses, who are Dreadlords, flexed their signature moves and shapeshifted into a number of NPCs, some of whom also happen to be dungeon bosses that we've encountered over the years. The range of characters is wide, from humans to Mogu to dragons, and even a demon hunter from the Burning Crusade days. Social media was quick to jump to the extreme conclusion that Dreadlords have gone the route of Marvel's Skrulls, and that for all we know, anybody can be a Dreadlord at any time. And blame towards lead narrative designer Steve Denuser came swiftly. Some would say that the lore has been destroyed. Denuser is trying way too hard to set up this 5D chess plot, that he's insulting the writing that came before. Meanwhile, lead encounter designer Kenneth Huang pointed out that, the way he sees it, the Dreadlords were practicing their ability to mimic previous existing people. The buff tooltip says they are imitating other beings, not that they necessarily were those beings all along. Meanwhile, Denuser himself hasn't responded, probably because literally anything he says will be reviled. I do want to point out that as recently as the 9.2 questline, we as champions find out that someone has been redirecting Covenant forces disguised as us, and it turns out Mal'Ganis manipulated the battlefield, a flex of his own before his and Quintessa's defeat later in the raid. Understandably, it puts into question the extent of what Dreadlords have done throughout Warcraft's history. Now, they don't seem to be operating at a Skrull-like level, as in, you know, they're controlling and micromanaging at every level like the Scarlet Crusade crusade. To our knowledge, anyone that we have fought who was a Dreadlord eventually revealed themselves during their encounter. Being able to change into someone else's form doesn't necessarily mean that the original person was body snatched and that they're dead. Infiltration is also about being able to slip in, gather information, maybe a little manipulation and sabotage, but also leaving without anyone suspecting a thing, including the person whose form was taken. At this stage of the story, now that we know Dreadlords played a part in gathering intelligence and sowing chaos and discord across the freaking universe, it would be pretty limp for them to go out without at least messing with our heads a few more times. Because if they didn't, that wouldn't be very Dreadlord, would it? Master infiltrators who only infiltrated recently established lore because people's feelings would be hurt? There's an extreme though. Like, imagine if these Dreadlords took on the forms of, say, Thrall or Jaina. Like, that would turn heads and make us wonder when and for what purpose. What if a character's actions in a novel were actually that of a Dreadlord? Heck, when you really step back, like, just the news of this, followed by people's reactions and discussions, are what makes the infiltration trope very annoying, but very fun. It opened up a heck of a rabbit hole to dive into, but, you know, my opinion, I think this is just a raid mechanic and nothing more. But the fact that we probably haven't even seen the last of Sardonathrius, it probably means that we've got to ask ourselves if he has got any grand plans of his own that we're going to see down the line. And now we've got to talk about the race to World First, which I've wrote about and rewrote, and I've just kind of settled on what you're about to hear. The race so far has been pretty exciting, where at least as of this recording, the latest kill was with Anduin, with Liquid's Death Knight god tanking the last few 100,000 HP after both tanks duoed the last million or so life. This also came after overcoming the King Crab Halandris, who proved to be a very difficult wall to overcome until just before the reset this week. The Anduin kill unfortunately turned out to be a little bit scuffed. Late in the encounter, the room is supposed to be filled with these evil divine stars that at one point the hitboxes were too big and they were nailing people. Raiders did claim that with time they would be able to overcome that themselves, however a hotfix was put in to resolve this. Unfortunately, the hotfixes made the hitboxes of these divine stars so small that they were almost passing through people harmlessly. That did help Team Liquid get a kill first, largely because they were more experienced in that final phase before the hotfix was implemented, and for the time being at least, the WoW team is going to leave these divine stars untouched to not mess with other guilds like Echo and otherwise taint the race. So far, there's been like zero drama. Yeah, I don't want to get into the he said of this drama, but instead I'm going to talk about the overall length of this race, which is nearing its conclusion, but it's also nearing the end of the raid week. The rest of what I'm about to say could be outdated. Just want to keep that in mind. Like, as of this writing, Liquid is polishing their strategy on Lords of Dread, with Echo being just a few hours behind. So anyway, we're approaching this third week of Mythic progression, which marks the introduction of the second legendary, giving players access to a beefed up version of their Covenant ability and can use a regular legendary on top of it for increased throughput and utility. Probably throughput. Top teams are going to melt the bosses that they have on farm, and it'll give them that much needed of a push on progression bosses, assuming that the race is still going on by like Tuesday or Wednesday. The way I see it, there's a line to be crossed where Liquid would have an unfair advantage over Echo, their European counterparts, and this is based on the long time difference. So let's pretend that by the time America has their reset, Liquid has the Jailer down to 20% life or something like that, while Echo has the Jailer down to 70%. Now that potentially means Liquid would have the time to re-clear for the extra throughput and get double legendaries and be ready to go and probably smash that last 20% before Echo even gets their reset. Now that wouldn't be very fair. On the other hand, if Liquid had a pretty definitive lead, like if they were at 20% on the Jailer, but Echo was still on Rygalon, the 10th boss, there would be very little question that Liquid simply outplayed Echo throughout the entire race. Here though is where I'm beefing a little bit. As a player who leans towards the more average demographic, next week's questline that gives us the second legendary will be very, very welcome, because for me and my team, Anduin is like this shirtless Chad who gently bludgeons us all to death, even after a solid pull and a bloodlust with all the cooldowns at the ready.
Sweet Jesus.
Good God.
Lord. Damn.
So we need more damage.
Yes, please.
So we could use the help At this stage, the second legendary and re-clear for some tier set bonuses will hopefully give us what we need to get past this 8th boss and progress towards the end. Now that whole scenario sounds kind of normal, right? In the context of the race to world first though, the timing between the availability of the second legendary and progressing past that wall that is there at the time is pretty critical. I think the WoW team wanted or hoped to do a good job of managing the major throughput milestones, which include average item level and 2 set bonuses, 4 set bonuses, and double legendaries. The end of this coming reset will decide how well they did. I think that if Rygalon is still alive by the time America has their reset, and the Jailer lasts for at least like 200 pulls or so, that would be a Blizzard win. If somehow the Jailer dies before this coming reset, that's probably unintended, but it would still be a win because a few days into the week, that 18-hour head start means less and less. I suppose that's sort of the sweet spot, right? Like if an end-tier boss goes down around the weekend or so, there's less dispute between one team starting earlier in the week versus the other team having an opportunity to observe and adopt strategies while resting their people to, the back and forth of whoever is ahead gets to beta test. My beef, which I'm taking too long to bring up, is this double legendary. Before the start of this season, there was a debate that the Unity legendary should be available right away, and the raid be originally tuned around its immediate availability. I'm questioning if that would have been in fact the better move to make, because I'm about ready to say that the lack of a second legendary is significant. It's almost a mathematical difference between the raid being possible and impossible to finish, and we'll see how that statement ages in the next few days. Anyway, while this doesn't adversely affect like 95% of the raiding population, it does sort of spoil progression a little bit, because this legendary is different from, say, a raid-wide buff for us, or a raid-wide nerf to bosses. This is different from a legendary cloak or a ring getting stronger over time. Those are examples of slow, gradual nerfs outside of item level. The second legendary, though, is a piece of gear that we suddenly get access to with a low accessibility barrier that will, for some, change how we play our classes. It's a very significant power gain that comes kind of at an arbitrary time that doesn't seem to serve its intended purpose outside of, pacing the race to world first. The TLDR, it's time gating. And that's the show. So I mentioned earlier that me and my guild, that we're on Anduin, and this is after smashing the first 4 bosses that we've already killed previously, and then that crab that we were progressing on, and then in the same night, like all this happened Tuesday, in the same night we learned and defeated the Pantheon fight and Lihuvim as well, and then Anduin just annihilated us for the rest of the week. It felt like the walls closing in on you, and there's nothing that you can do to stop the inevitable. Like your best efforts and positive energy will not save you. With the way the raid and the season has been, to us at least, progressing through it has been slower than previous seasons for sure. Like we've had seasons where normal is cleared in a week, and slowly it's been pushed back a little bit. 1 week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks. We're going to approach our 4th week with only 7 bosses down. This is kind of a new record for us in a bad way. I don't know if having double legendaries from the start would have let us clear faster though. Like, I don't know if that would have made the team feel better or worse for it, but what we felt this week was some progression, and that always feels good. Next week is going to be hopefully more progression, but overall for everyone, it's just going to be a big deal. It's going to be another wing of Raid Finder. It's going to come with more opportunities for tier. We're going to get double legendaries, meaning even more power will be available for players. The player economy is going to go insane with demand for legendary base pieces and consumables and more. So there's a lot of gold to be made if you're not a serious gold maker. And also Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is out next week. I'm a big sucker for Borderlands games, so I'm going to at least take a close look at what people are saying while I'm screwing up in Elden Ring. Let's go. Let's wrap things up with a very hearty thanks to our subscribers over on Twitch, the beloved patrons, and to you, the viewer, for sticking around. Show some support for the channel by looking at this other animation that I recently got. Ooh, like the video, subscribe for more content, maybe join the Patreon family, that would be fantastic. Next week might be interesting though. There are some new leaks and, well, something else dropped into my lap just earlier. It was a rant from a so-called ex-WoW dev spilling the beans on what really happened happened during Shadowlands development. I call these fake rants, and I look forward to tearing that apart live on stream next week. So join us for some Coffee with Soul every Tuesday through Thursday starting at 8:30 a.m. Pacific. I wish you all a fun weekend. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.